Welcome into Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. It is the Friday edition of the program. I appreciate all of you hanging out with me as we roll through the latest in the world of sports, the coronavirus, and beyond here on Outkick the Show. Your boy is a massive target. This probably won't surprise you who listen to the show regularly, who watch the show regularly. Our audience is exploding because there is a great demand for reasonable analysis that isn't marinating in fear and anxiety and the idea that the coronavirus is the worst thing that has ever existed in the history of mankind. I have been telling you since this thing started back in March, we know how it ends. The only question is how long does it take? And there are a lot of people who want to dive all into the negativity. They want to rip people to shreds. They want to say, we've never seen anything like this in the history of the United States or the world. And the truth of the matter is, we have. This is going to be another triumph for the United States and another triumph in general for the world when it comes to positivity. And so let me give you a coronavirus positivity here. We now have 5 straight days where total new daily cases have declined in the United States. Not sure officially whether we have peaked, but do know that we are drastically underperforming the numbers that were put out from the IHME policy. And so, if you look at this situation, New York may well have peaked in total deaths. They may well have nearly peaked in total cases. The overall number of tests continues to increase, and the number of positive tests continues to decrease. We are on a rapid comeback trail. And I understand there are people out there who don't want to believe that this is true. They want to believe that the doom and the gloom and the fear is going to carry them. They are anxious. They are filled with trepidation. And they don't want to believe anything that's remotely positive. But I am here to tell you that we're going to beat the coronavirus. And I believe we're going to have sports back in June and July, and I'm going to get to that in the near future here. And I believe that we're going to have college football in the NFL this fall. I really do. And I think all of the data supports that that is likely to happen. Okay? Now, there are some people out there who don't want to believe this is going to happen. There are some people out there that get mad at me because from the get-go, I haven't bought in to the doom and gloom. I looked at the data from Asia. Granted, some of that was inaccurate from China, and I've talked about that a lot with you. But if you looked at the data from Japan, you looked at the data from Singapore, you looked at the data from Hong Kong, you looked at the data from South Korea, I didn't see any evidence at all to support the idea that all of those Asian countries were going to be able to handle the coronavirus. And that suddenly the United States of America and Great Britain were going to have millions of people die. I didn't buy into it. And so when that big imperial forecast came out, people got mad at me because I said the data doesn't in any way support that over 2 million people are going to die. And I said using the China data in conjunction with the Asia data, I thought there would likely be low thousands of deaths. Maybe even barely 1,000 if China's numbers of 3,000 had been accurate. And China's numbers are flagrantly wrong. The WHO carried water for them. I think there need to be significant consequences, including potentially taking away the 2022 Olympics in Beijing. But all of those Asian countries, even if you include China, which we still don't know what the total numbers were, but all of them managed to defeat the coronavirus without having millions of deaths. So I didn't understand why in the world suddenly in Europe and the United States, we'd be unable to do it. And I think what happened here, and this is a really interesting lesson, and I might need to write a whole nother book about the coronavirus in general. I think some people hate Donald Trump so much that they want to buy into worst case scenarios for anything that he is remotely involved in. Russia, worst case scenario. Jeff Sessions, worst case scenario. Comey, worst case scenario. The phone call with the Ukraine, worst case scenario. The coronavirus, worst case scenario. And they lose what would otherwise be their logic and their rational thought at the door because they're so angry. They're so deranged by their hate for Donald Trump that they don't allow their mental faculties to actually process. Now, look, I've said this for a long time. I didn't vote for Donald Trump in 2016. I voted for Gary Johnson. And I certainly understand why people voted against Donald Trump, just like I understand why people voted for him and also why people voted for or against Hillary Clinton. I didn't like the 2016 campaign. But I root for every president to succeed. And evidently, that's now a rare thing. I didn't vote for George W. Bush, but I didn't want us to fail after 9/11. I supported every president because it doesn't make me feel better if I vote against someone and then they fail, because if they fail, then the country fails. I want every president to do as good as they possibly can because they represent all of us. And so I don't agree with every decision Donald Trump has made, but I actually think the White House Coronavirus Task Force, Dr. Birx, Dr. Fauci, the Surgeon General who we had on the television or the radio program yesterday, I think they've done a pretty good job. And I never bought into the millions of people were going to die. And yes, I was on the low side saying that I believed there would be fewer people probably to die of the coronavirus in the United States than dies from the average flu. I may end up being correct in that. I'm certainly going to be a lot closer to being correct than all the experts out there, in quotation marks, who said 2 million people were going to die. And so I think if you look at this, the question that I have is, why is a dissenting voice from the mainstream opinion shouted down so often by social media? Why does social media in this day and age demand consensus? There are lots of people who are epidemiologists at Harvard, at Stanford, at Oxford, the head of medicine in all of Australia. This new German study that has come out, which says the death rate is 0.37% at the highest, that there's a huge number of people who are asymptomatic and also already have antibodies in their blood. Why is that argument not given similar attention compared to the most dire forecast? This is a real question that demands real answers. And I think it's significant because rational public policy requires robust arguments on multiple sides of an issue. I am more scared of everybody believing they know something, especially in the government, than I am by Democrats and Republicans fighting it out. And the analogy that I have made is, and some of you are too young to remember this, back in 2001, after 9/11, Republicans branded everyone who was opposed to going to war in Iraq or going into Afghanistan or spending trillions of dollars on our response to 9/11 as anti-patriotism, as if they were not in favor of American patriotism. And one of the big issues with that, one of the big casualties in the media from that was Bill Maher. Do you remember Bill Maher, who used to have the politically incorrect television show on ABC? He said on his television program that he believed that it was that the terrorists in 9/11 were not cowards, because by definition, cowards would not give up their life for something they believed in. You could call them crazy. You could call them insane religious zealots. All of those are accurate descriptions of those people. But they weren't, in his opinion, cowards. He lost his television program because that was an unacceptable opinion to have. And right now, in response to the coronavirus, it seems to me there's only one response allowed, and that is all doom and gloom. Millions of people are going to die. And the data, to me, never has reflected that millions of people are going to die because Asia didn't have it happen there. And if you believe, as I did, at least in the numbers from Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and Hong Kong, what are they doing that is so exceptional that the United States eventually would not be able to do it as well? So what I said from the get-go was, if this becomes significant, we'll be able to respond to it like Asia did. Now, here's where I think we had an unfortunate situation. We had China lying about the worst case scenario. And I, as well as many other people, I think in European governments as well as the United States government, looked at China's numbers and said, okay, if China started off not even knowing what was going on and ended up with 80,000 infections and ultimately only had 3,000 people die, then the worst case scenario is not actually that bad. And I think if China had been willing to be honest here from the get-go, first of all, they might have stopped it from ever spreading outside of China, like we did with SARS, like we did with Ebola, like we did with MERS, all those other infectious diseases. But even if it spread, I think we would have understood the danger that potentially could happen in terms of the outbreak. Even then, the outbreak wouldn't have ever hit millions of deaths. But that is the biggest flaw here. And that's where I wish I had had the actual information that was accurate. But I don't understand why the Corona Bros out there wanted a lot of people to die just so it could confirm all of their hate for the President of the United States. Because don't make a mistake about it. That's what a lot of the Corona Bros wanted. And now the Corona Bros are left with a tough question, along with many of the blue checkmark Twitter brigade. They have to answer a question. Were the models that they shared, which were wildly inaccurate and predicted millions of deaths, were they wildly inaccurate, or did Donald Trump save millions of lives? Because one or the other has to be true based on their arguments. Either that Imperial College model that they shared when they all went around and they parroted the idea that millions of people were going to die, either that was inaccurate, or Donald Trump has saved millions of lives. And they're really kind of painted into a corner here, and I think that is why they are coming after people like me. Because I have been validated in the fact that the coronavirus is nowhere near as dangerous as many people believed it was going to be, and that the United States was going to be able to stop it. It's likely, based on the new IHME model, that we are going to have less people die of the coronavirus in this country than died of the flu 2 years ago. 80,000 people died of the flu 2 years ago, according to the CDC. And that's why they've decided to attack me. But here's the deal. And I've said this for years, and those of you who listen to me for a long time know this. And it's probably not a surprise that I get attacked the day after I have the Surgeon General on the television show, the radio show, and the day after I have somebody else from the Trump White House on the radio show. I know how the game is played. But I will say this. Getting attacked is good for my brand. Because every time you get attacked, people become more aware of who you are. I've found this since I first started writing online, and people started ripping me. Every time somebody rips you, more people become aware that you exist. And maybe 70% of the people agree with whoever ripped you. But 30% of people are like, hey, I'll go check this guy out. And I guarantee you we're going to have a bigger audience in April than we had in March, which is our biggest audience of all time. And that's without sports even happening, because the truth of the matter is this. If you regularly listen to my programs, if you listen to my radio show, if you read my site, if you watch my Periscope or my Facebook, or even if you just read my Twitter feed, you come to an interesting conclusion. The things that I get attacked for are not reflective of what I say on a daily basis. And that's why ultimately I win and continue to win and will win into the future. Because I'm good at radio, pretty good at television. I'm even good on Periscope and Facebook, and I'm pretty good at writing too. And all those things rolled in together leads to a continuing media brand, which honestly grows just as much when sports aren't going on. Used to be very cyclical. College football season, numbers go through the roof. NFL season, numbers go through the roof. But once it actually became not football season, there wasn't a lot of audience. Now, you've got a massive audience all year round. Somebody said recently, I can't believe you're going to die on this hill. I said, son, I don't die on hills. I build mansions there. Also build mansions soon on the beach. That's coming down the line soon as well. Not have a good house, not a good enough house at the beach for me right now. That's coming. And the critics are allowing me to do it, which makes them so much angrier than they otherwise would be. Hill turns into a mountain, and I can see a lot farther from there. So that is where we are headed. Let me hit you with some news. This is interesting. I got to give props to Dana White. I got to give props to Dana White for attempting to get the UFC done for April 18th. It would be easy for Dana White, who is worth tens of millions of dollars, to kick up his feet, to roll back, to have absolutely nothing to worry about from the coronavirus, live in his mansion out in Las Vegas, hang out by the pool, and wait till this thing blows over. Instead, he's trying to represent the best of American ingenuity, whether it's the Fight Island, whether it's taken over a tribal area in California that isn't subject to existing American or state law. Here is the problem. He shouldn't have done it in California. And this is a larger issue that's going to go forward. Dana White said that ESPN put the pressure on him through Disney because the politicians in California, Gavin Newsom, Dianne Feinstein, were not happy with the idea that he was going to put on an event there. This is a big issue going forward because I wonder what the precedent is that's being set for the NBA, NHL, NFL, Major League Baseball, all of the teams that could be based in California. Are they going to have to start their seasons outside the state? Because remember, what Dana White was doing with the UFC is not any different than what Vince McMahon just did with WrestleMania. Vince McMahon in Florida just put on WrestleMania, no crowds present, relatively limited number of wrestlers. I'm assuming that he tested all of the wrestlers, which is easy to do now. The UFC could do the same thing if they hadn't been in California. But what is the precedent that is being set in California? If April 19th is not permissible, when is going to be permissible to have events in the state of California? And let me say this. Gavin Newsom has gotten a lot of credit for what he has done in California, but the numbers in California aren't very different than what the numbers look like in Florida and the numbers look like in Texas, and they have not adopted as draconian of regulations in Florida or in Texas as they have in the state of California. So what exactly is going on there such that we've got similar numbers of infections and deaths in California, Texas, and Florida, big states with massive populations? What is going on right there is really interesting. Is that telling us something larger about the virus and its transmissibility? Because right now, by and large, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut is totally different than anywhere else in the country. And it doesn't appear that any other part of the country has anywhere near the curve that they do in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So what is it about this virus that made it so incredibly fertile in that region and not very fertile elsewhere? Is it the warm weather comparatively in Texas and Florida and California? Is it the distance? People live from each other. There's a more natural social distancing that exists in those states because they have larger landscapes. They don't have the density that New York City does. Is it the lack of public transit use? What is it? Is it the lack of family generations living together in those areas compared to New York? I don't know. There will be fascinating studies that come out to analyze that. But while everybody is talking about the difference between, say, California and New York, what I find intriguing is the similarity between California, Texas, and Florida. You got two Republican governors and a Democratic governor. And Florida hasn't blown up despite the fact that it's a major tourist attraction and tons of people have come down from New York to try to relocate to Florida. What exactly is going on there? These are intelligent, interesting questions that I think epidemiologists are going to have to review. But in the meantime, California, what is the precedent they are setting by shutting down the UFC? Now, some people are blaming Disney. I don't really blame Disney, which owns ESPN. When the governor and the senators from your state lean on you, it doesn't surprise me that they then leaned on Dana White because they want to be able to open back up Disneyland soon. And it's a political decision that Disney had to make associated with ESPN. But props to Dana White for trying to get this done. I hope Fight Island is ready to go sooner rather than later. The XFL. I gave props to Vince McMahon for getting WrestleMania done last weekend. I do think it's an interesting question. what happened with the XFL. They were producing pretty good audiences when suddenly they ran into the coronavirus. Reports are they aren't going to come back next season. If that is true, the XFL and the AAF will have failed very close to each other. I thought the XFL had a good product. I enjoyed watching their games. And if they fail, this will be 0 for 2 for Vince McMahon. And I question whether anybody in the near future is ever going to try to start another football league to compete in any way with the NFL. This is going to be actually, unfortunately, I think, a real hit to a lot of people who had bought into the idea of the XFL. I liked the possibility that players who might not otherwise have opportunities to pursue their dreams could still attempt to play minor league football and fight their way into the NFL while making a decent salary. And I'm disappointed that it failed. I think had the coronavirus not come along and basically shut down sports in this country in mid-March, I think the XFL would have been in a lot better shape. So it's unfortunate the way that all shook out. All right, and finally, Tom Brady, I'm going to be honest with you. As a Titans fan who lives in Nashville, I am jealous of the fact that Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay. I wish the Titans had made a run at Tom Brady. I do think it's funny, however, that Tom Brady has filed for trademarks with 2 different terms. Tompa Bay, it's like Tom Brady meets Tampa Bay, and Tampa Brady. I don't know what exactly is going to happen with those trademarks. I think it's a little bit funny that they're already popular. The excitement is off the charts in Tampa Bay. I told you guys this on the radio yesterday. If you told me right now, other than my favorite team, which is the Titans, that I could only watch one team this coming season in the NFL, it would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's how much I care about how Tom Brady's going to do with Chris Godwin, with Mike Evans, with O.J. Howard, with everybody on that Tampa Bay team. If you told me outside of the team that you have season tickets for, Clay, you can only watch one team in the NFL this year, all 16 of their games, it's Tampa Bay, and it's not even a difficult choice for me. So props to the Bucs for getting Tom Brady. I'm excited to see how he's going to do this fall. Love all of you. Thank you for being a part of the Outkick universe. Appreciate you listening to the radio program, watching this show, sharing it with your friends and family. Biggest month ever in March. Bigger month coming. I feel confident in the month of April. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. Have great weekends. Happy Easter to everyone. I will talk to you guys maybe tomorrow, maybe Sunday. Who knows when I'll talk to you again. Will be sometime soon. Love all you. Kisses. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. See y'all. Love you. Thank you, Facebook. See ya.